Hi, and welcome to Redevony. I am Akayasha. You can call me Aka. So guys, we all know about Siege. We know Siege is a significant part of the game. We know it's an expensive part of the game. It's a tough thing to build. It's a tough thing to set up so that your defense is working properly with Siege. Now, some of you might know this, but there's something that, I don't know, it has become a bit of a prevalent myth in Evony. It's something that people hear and they share and it goes round, but nobody really knows why or can really explain what it is. And that is in regarding T4 Siege. For some reason, T4 Siege has now become one of the crucial points that you need to pay attention to when building. And it's difficult to understand why that is. Now, the main cause of this is probably a phenomenon that you see in your battle reports. So, take a report like this, for example, okay? This is one of my Alliance's defense reports from recent Shalons. And when you're subjected to a siege rally, you see things like this, okay? You see the upper tier siege being killed off, all right? You can see it there for the T15, for the T14, and to an extent for the T13, okay? A lot of siege being killed off. Tiny portion of the T12, and then siege stops dying, okay? That's what you see. But then, if you scroll down further, okay, we keep going. You can see there's no wounded for the siege. There's nothing there, until we get to T4 Siege. You then see that T4 Siege takes on wounded. And if you scroll further down, nothing else is wounded. Okay, no other siege. So that is an observable phenomenon that we see in Evony reports. And because of that, T4 Siege has taken on a life of its own. Whether in respect to protecting your siege or protecting your archers or protecting your other troops or whatever, the thing now is to build tons and tons and tons of T4 Siege. As you can see right here, okay? My alliance mate is someone that has, obviously heard about this story before. But is this actually true? Is this something that is actually really valid? Or is it just an old wives' tale that has taken on a life of its own? Now, as fortune might have it, I had the opportunity of sitting down with a very good friend of mine. Okay, some of you might know him by the name of Derek Defies. So we sat down and we had a nice, conversation specifically about this T4 Siege business. And the recording of that is coming up very shortly. But first, there are two important things that I need to say before we get to that part of the video. The first one, obviously, I need to plug our sponsor, Paxify. And Paxify are really great. Great for saving on packs, great for helping you make your money go further. You should really check out Paxify if you're spending on the game. Links and everything that you need are down in the description of the video. Now, the second important thing that I need to talk about is, this might sound a bit crazy, but I want to use this opportunity as a challenge to the Evony community. This T4 Siege business is something that a lot of people do everywhere, and I have not heard a coherent explanation for why that is. So, as you watch through this video and you hear what we discuss and the conclusions that we come to, I give this as a challenge to the Evony community. If you disagree with this, explain why. Let's have a coherent and thoughtful argument for why this T4 thing exists and why we shouldn't just consider it as a myth that has permeated Evony. So, that's my challenge to everyone. Watch the video, hear what we discuss, let us know what your views are, and let's talk this thing out. All right, guys. So, without further ado, I'm going to slide to the left for me and my friend Derek. Alrighty. Derek, my man, how you doing?
Hey, Akka. How's it going?
Doing good. Yourself?
And great. Glad to be here.
All right. Okay, that's cool. So I think we need to, I don't know, do we put on our uniforms today or whatnot? Because we're like myth busting, ghost busting, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, that's what we're here to do today, right?
That's half of Evony is myth busting.
Okay. All right, that's fine. So you know what this is about, right? You know about the whole T4 siege myth in Evony. Yeah, I say it's a myth because I haven't ever seen it proven. I know it's one of those things that people are always like, yeah, well, somebody told me to do it. And it's like, okay, does it actually work? And things like that. So that's what we want to talk about here. I want to get your view on it, your take on it. I'll share mine as well. And yeah, we'll just see if it's actually something that makes sense for people to do.
Right. And I think the Tier 4 Siege myth does come with what people do perceive. They see Tier 4s getting hit before their bigger Tier Siege. So they think that their Tier 4s are, in a way, protecting their big Tier Siege. And I think that's where the myth comes from.
Okay, all right. I like how you brought that up. So just to set us up for what we're going to discuss here, just give me like a brief overview of how the siege mechanic work when you're defending and where T4 siege comes into that whole mix.
Right. So if we were to actually look at the ranges of Siege in Evony, I'm going to share this graph on here. Evony doesn't give the correct values of the siege ranges. The base siege ranges for your tiers are 900, 1000, 1100, 1200, 1400. And we can
Okay.
provide this table so we can look at
Okay.
it.
You want me to look at your screen?
Sure, we can do
All right.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just bring it up right here. Okay. All right. I see you've got this this table. Okay, let me zoom in a bit. All right.
So the entire battlefield for Evony is 1500 units. I often will just say meters to make it easy.
Okay.
And when you look at the various ranges, the ones that we're going to concentrate on are going to be somebody that's using either a 10% uh, ring, siege range increasing ring, like a Achaemenid ring, or what's more common is a Choreo bracer, which
Okay.
is going to add 15% to that range.
Okay.
People will generally only use a tier 4 book, a level 4 book, or no book at all. But most
Mm-hmm.
commonly, you'll see a level 4 book with a 15% choreo bracer. That's going to be the most common setup you're going to see on defenses.
Okay.
The major thing on how this works is if you're looking at this right here, this 1055, that is the range of your tier 4 siege. And if you look at the next siege, you have 1170.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how the mechanics work is that the siege want to move up to attack a troop if it's not in range. Well, if we look at the tier 5 to tier 8 with 1170, we're going to attack our ground troops. And I want to kind of explain that. Ground troops, we know that the speed of ground troops is 350. Okay.
Okay.
Mounted speed is 300. That's another thing that Evney's a little misleading on. But when you have the attacking ground at 350 and it moves up 350, if we were to add this 1170 through tier 5 and tier 8, we'll get a range of 1520. Now, I know I'm going to lose some people with the math, but all this is saying is that with a range that's going to basically exceed that battlefield length, uh, the tier 5 and tier 8, they never move. They don't need to move. They can reach the ground troops and attack the ground troops. You'll see this in your battle reports where when you're attacking somebody, a lot of your ground troop layers are dead. That's because these tier 5s through tier 8s are attacking them before they ever reach that clash in the center.
Okay.
So when you look at tier 4s, their range is 1055. When you add that 350, it's now 1405. This means because it's less than 1500, they actually have to move up to try to hit the ground, and their speed is 75. So they'll move up 75 units, but they'll never reach that 1580, that 1500. So
Mm-hmm.
they actually won't attack the ground on the first turn. So
Mm-hmm.
tier 1 through tier 4 never attack anything on the first turn. The first turn of theirs is completely wasted. But this is why they're actually in a position ahead of all the other siege, because they actually had to move up because nothing was in range of them.
I see. Okay, I
So
see. I see. Yeah.
yeah, and it makes them a prime target for the tier 11s and tier 12s. If we were to look at, let's say, the tier 11 and tier 12 range, we see that it's 1400, right? Well, because it's 1400, you add on that extra 75 that we were talking about. So
Mhm.
if we were to look at a tier 12 siege, they have that 1400 range. Their effective range is they can hit anything that is within 1475 away from them.
Mhm.
Well, since a lot of the siege is not going to move, the tier 5s, the tier 8s, the tier 9s, all the way up to the tier 15s, none of them are going to move on the first turn. They're going to target those tier 4s first. So when you have
Mhm.
tier 11 siege hitting you, that's why they're going to target the tier 4s. It's because the tier 4s are not sitting in the back line. They're moved up ahead a little bit, allowing the tier 11s and tier 12 sieges to attack them.
Mhm. Okay. All right. That's
So,
interesting.
yeah,
So because of that, that's why you have some parts of your report showing you've taken damage on your upper siege, and then it cuts off round about like what, like T10 or T9 or something, and then you then go to your T4 and then you start seeing damage again.
correct. And a
Okay.
misconception, some people think that the high tier siege get attacked first because that makes sense for most of the battles. Your higher tier troops get attacked first. But in Siege, because they're very special, the tier 4s get attacked first when it comes to being attacked by tier 11, tier 12 Siege.
Okay. All right. I think that makes sense from the mechanic standpoint. Tier 1, tier 4 are further ahead, which is why they end up taking damage first. And then when those ones get damaged, then they will go back and attack the ones that are behind them. Okay. All right.
Right.
That's fine. Fine. So I think that has, like at least from the mechanic standpoint, that has set us up nicely for, getting us to understand what's going on here. So the question now is, since those, tier 4s have moved up, are they actually effective for defending? All right. So, let me know what your views are. And I don't know, maybe we can even split them into, like, pros and cons, like which ones are, what are the positives, what are the negatives of the thing. So it's now, are these effective for defending?
So with the tier 1 to tier 4s, because of their limited range, they actually will not be able to uh, get to archers because the siege and all troops, they don't move up unless there's a higher priority target that's within their effective range, and that means whatever their range is plus their speed. So they
Mhm.
will only attack ground troops for the majority of the battle until your vanguard troops, your ground troops and mounted troops are dead, and then they can
Mhm.
start attacking archers if they ever make it up to it. So when you look at tier 1s through tier 4s, they're only going to pretty much attack ground troops. So their only effectiveness in battle can be taking out, let's say, some of those ground troop players, because people do send tier 16s all the way down to tier 1s or tier 17 if you have the money. But that's going to you're basically just going to take out those layers. So having those tier ones and tier fours enough to kill some of those layers, that's good. That would be
Okay. Okay.
effective
So
in its own way.
that's a pro for the T1 to T4, that they're effective at taking out some of those, you know, like you said, vanguard layers, ground layers. I might want to even include some carve layers in that. Is that the case?
Yeah, after all the ground layers are, let's say you were getting hit by an archer attack. After all the ground layers are gone, well, there's no more ground layers. Uh, there's no ground layers in range. There's no archers in range because they're really far out. So now the siege will attack the mounted a little bit.
Okay. That's a pro for them. So if you're getting hit with a lot of layers, then the T1 T4 siege will help you cut those down. Okay, that's fine. So that's a pro for them in defending. Anything else?
The only other small pro that I would say is that when you get hit by let's say a tier 11 or tier 12 siege rally, or any kind of siege rally, and your archers start becoming on the line of getting attacked, as long as you don't have too crazy big numbers of tier 1 through tier 4 siege, you can kind of use them as defensive layers before your archers getting attacked. But a cost benefit ratio to that I think we'll discuss a little bit later.
Okay. All right. So there is some benefit in the sense that if you're getting hit with siege or something, these T1 to T4 will take hits over your ranged layers. So
Right.
that's a pro for them. But whether that's beneficial or not will depend on other factors, which we're still going to talk about later.
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's fine. That's fine. So any other pros for having T1, T4 siege and defending that you can think of?
It makes you very friendly towards the enemies on the opposite battlefield or SVS. They absolutely love you for having a lot of them, so you can make friends that way.
Okay, I think I don't know that doesn't seem like a pro in my opinion, but okay, all right. So let's talk about the cons. Okay, so we've talked about the pros for having T1. So what's not good about them in their effectiveness? Are they like okay? We talked about like ground layers and things like that. Let me ask you a very very good question. Um, are they actually effective in killing the big stuff?
No, yeah. When you look at the base stats of a tier 1 or tier 4 siege, you'll see that the tier 1 siege, the base stat is 100, and even if you have a uh, good stats, good buffs, with the tier 1 siege having a low attack and also having a really bad multiplier, there is a troop modifier from siege to ground and to mounted, and it's pretty bad.
Mhm.
Are going to struggle killing high tier ground and high tier mounted. Right there, they could take out the little stuff because eventually the little stuff is also going to be attacked as well. But in terms of taking out a tier 15 ground, if you had, I think, let's say a million tier 4 siege, they'd probably only kill about, I'd say, 40 tier 15 ground. And of course, that's depending on buffs. So you'd have to have a lot of siege to make a dent, and that, of course, would take a lot of resources to make those siege.
Okay, so let me see if I'm getting you right. All right, let's look at this progressively. Tier 4 siege, from what we discussed earlier with the range, are not really in range to attack the other big siege, right?
Correct.
Okay, so Tier 4 siege will not attack the other big siege in a rally. Okay, now are they in range to attack, let's say, archers?
No.
Okay, they are not in range to attack big archers. So if you're taking a big like range rally or something, at least for the first turn, the T1 to T4 are not in range to attack the siege, the big siege. They're not in range to attack the big archers. We know that they are in range to attack the ground layers. We also know that depending on the thickness of the ground layers, they will finish those off and they will attack cav layers. Okay. My question now is that do they attack the big ground or the big cav?
The first ones that they'll attack will be the big ground. If there are
Okay.
any cav left, because remember, the enemy's cav layers are being killed by archers, so there might not be any cavs really left to be attacked by the siege, but they're going to be primarily focusing on ground. Ground has a high HP and a high defense, and that high HP and high defense make it so that the low tier siege are like little squeaky toys on them. They're not doing that much damage at all, so
Mhm.
they're very ineffective, especially with the high tiers.
Okay. All right. So they are not doing that much damage to the big ground and to the big cav.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So like I think the way you put it is like squeaky toy. I think that's like like those squeaky hammers. I think that's a good way to. So the T1 to T4 siege, at least for the first turn, either don't have the range to attack the big stuff or don't have the power to damage the big stuff.
Correct.
All right. Okay. So I think that definitely falls into the cons direction. Okay. Is there anything else?
A major con with people focusing, because the idea of focusing on tier fours are going to be to protect their big siege. That's
Mhm.
completely false. It can, in a sense, you could protect your archers, but what you're doing is you're giving the enemy more points in SVS and Battlefield to protect your archers. Now, the point ratio is tier four siege is worth 8 times the many as many points as tier one siege. Okay, and they'll
Mhm.
effectively do the same thing. Uh,
Okay.
and their stats are not that different. As in, the tier four siege are about 2.5 times stronger than the tier one siege. But
Mhm.
again, their base stats are all very low, so it's not a very significant amount. But being only 2.5 times stronger and worth 8 times the amount of points, you would be better off doing a bunch of tier one siege. However, you I'm just saying tier one siege are better than tier four siege. However,
Mhm.
if you're still trying to use that as a strategy to protect like your tier 15 archers, your tier 15 archers are still going to give less points than tier 1 siege. Even if you put all the flat defense and HP on your refines on your defense general, which is a terrible idea, but even if you did that, the archers, your tier 15 archers, will still give away less points in a battlefield or SBS type of scenario. Approximately 20 times less points. So, kind of
All right.
think of it that way.
So what you said now is that T1, T4 siege, which I think we mentioned earlier, they won't protect like your higher tier siege. What they could potentially do is protect your higher tier archers. That part is correct, right?
Yes,
Okay. But in protecting your higher tier archers, we're saying that the amount of okay, this is not power exchange now. We're talking about points in point-based scenarios, SVS, battlefield. I think the points that you use are specifically SVS, right?
yes,
Okay. So what we're saying is that in trying to use tier 4 siege to sort of be the protection of your higher tier archers, you are actually setting yourself up for giving away more points than if you just let those archers take the hit.
absolutely. And I did a little calculation on this, and if you had, let's say, 3,000% buffs, and the enemy had 3,000% buffs, down the board, and we're not taking debuffs or flats really into account,
Mm-hmm.
your tier ones without flats, flat refines, and one attack of a million tier 11 siege would
Mm-hmm.
lose 42,000 SPS points. Sorry, 42 million SPS points. Where that same attack would cause your tier 15 archers to only lose 2 million in SVS points. And the reason why I go with SVS points or battlefield points is because power is very abstractive. It just seems like they kind of Evony made up power. So when you look at a report and you said, "Oh, we won the power exchange," you could have still very well lost that point exchange.
Okay. All right. All right. I think that's fine. I think that's fine. So we've talked about the positive side of having T4s. We've talked about the negative side. Okay. However, there is something that you mentioned, or well, we've kind of been talking about it, and I wanted us to get some clarification on that. Based on the ranges, we're looking at T1 to T4 siege as, if you want to call it like a bracket of siege that we have there. Now, because these siege have similar range, they have similar speeds and things like that, they pretty much move together. So my question now is that between this T1 to T4 siege, okay, if T4 siege is giving off more points, then what about the T1 siege? Wouldn't that
I
work since they're all bunched up together? Would it be an effective strategy to switch from instead T4 siege to like T1 siege since they're, they move together and stuff?
Tier 1 siege are more effective than tier 4 siege, and we see this even with let's say tier 1 mounted. You don't see anybody building their tier 4 mounted and their tier 4 mounted defense. We never hear a tier 4 mounted trap, and that's just
Mm-hmm.
because the tier 4 mounted are worth so many more points, and they're not going to benefit as much uh, from buffs. The lower tier troops do not benefit from percentage buffs as much as the higher tier troops. And
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to these new red flexible specialties, which are giving everybody an extra 2,000 flat attack, that's great for the lower tier siege right now. That the tier 1 to tier 4 siege are now more able to take out those layers that we talked about. However, if you wanted to focus on one of these siege, which again, everybody wants to do their own strategy, I would advise to stay away from the tier fours and work on the tier ones as they're cheaper, they're worth less points, and they're going to effectively be worth the hit as hard as the tier fours, practically speaking, anyway.
All right, that's interesting. So instead of doing the tier fours, you're saying it'll be better to do the tier ones. Will they, okay, from two perspectives. One, will they deal damage? And two, will they take damage? So will they be effective in actually attacking some other troops? I think we've talked on that already, but I'll just bring it up again. And two, will they be effective in taking damage so that, if the objective is to protect, T15 archers and above, will they actually be effective in doing that?
I I have seen people with 100 million. I'm sorry, like I think a hundred, yeah, 100 million, maybe close to 200 million. Uh, Tier 1 siege, and that's gonna take
Mhm.
out layers, even big layers. So you could say, yeah, it's good at taking out layers, and yes, it's going to protect, your bigger archers, and it's going to be more efficient than the Tier 4 siege. All of that is true. However, the trade-off is not worth it. I would not spend my resources on any of these lower tier sieges. Just having the layers, the protective layers, would be useful, and that way that you're not a juicy target to everybody for a tier 11 or tier 12 siege rally. Now, what
Okay.
you could do, and this is a little bit higher thinking, is remember we talked about the reason why these are targeted is because of their range. If you
Yes.
did have somebody reinforce you with just layers, and they do not have the extra range from a bracer, for example. In fact, if somebody did do a tier 11, tier 12 rally on you, it would protect your siege quite a bit for a few layers because they're tier 9s and tier 10s, tier 8s, tier 5. Those would be attacked first because they have a lower range. They're going to move up similar to what the tier 1 through tier 4 siege. But that's about all you could do to protect the siege. Otherwise, you will be giving away points.
All right. So let me get you straight. What you're saying is that if you were being if you're taking a rally and you were being reinforced by someone that didn't have the bracers, so maybe they had like the 10% ring or something like that, they didn't have the bracers. What you're saying is that the reinforcement layer will act as protection to your stuff.
Correct. And something that you should also think about is when you get rallied, the tier 11s that are targeting your tier 4 siege, they only target them on the first turn. After that, they're going to target the highest tier siege that you have as a defender. So if you had enough reinforcers, and again, this is like if somebody reinforces you with ground or mounted or even archers, because people typically do not have a 15% type of bracer or rings on those generals, your tier 8s and tier 7s and all those other sieges are going to move up similar to how the tier 1s and tier 4s do on a defense, and that's going to make them targeted. So if you were able to survive that initial hit, you'll see that you did a lot better. And I think that sometimes people will see those types of battle reports and they say, well, I did a tier 11 rally on this guy. And sure, he has a couple reinforcements. He just has ground reinforcements and archer reinforcements. But how come I didn't do that much damage? It's because a lot of your tier 11 siege layers were wasting their turns on the reinforcements.
That's interesting. I think that one certainly, proves the value of having reinforcements when taking these rallies. And that's good. I don't know if we can really base a defensive strategy on for T1 and T4 solely on the fact of whether you have reinforcements or not. Um, I guess that would also go into like the con section for this one. But I think what you've said so far, it just leads me to believe that there is some merit in using T1s over T4s, but from a practical standpoint, none is better. Like none is good in what we would, classify good. Is
Right.
that is that a fair take?
My suggestion to anybody that's trying to make a benefit to their defense is have just typical layers for your tier 1 through tier 4. Again, they can help a little bit with taking out enemies layers, like the smaller, weaker layers. But if you make too many, you're making it so that you are now a target and you're giving up more points than you should be.
Okay. All right. That's fine. That's fine. Based on everything that we have talked on so far, because people, okay, people will hear this stuff and they're like, okay, I get or I don't get, they will say that. So let's give the overall verdict now. Okay. T4 siege, effective for defense. Yes or no?
So,
No. Okay. T4 siege, should you build tons of them? Yes or no?
no,
Okay. T4 siege, if you want to protect your top tier archers and your top tier siege, should you have lots of them?
no,
No. Okay. Finally, T4 siege. should we treat them as a special layer, or should we just treat them as any other layer that we would have in our keep?
I would treat them as any other layer.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I think that is, very concise, very instructive. And with that, yeah, if somebody's telling you build a ton of T4 Siege, just tell them no. Because it's, at least from what I've seen, from what people have shown me, and Dan, this is just, if you want to call it anecdotal stuff, I haven't seen any benefit of people having them. And then, of course, everybody knows you, Derek. We know how you are with the mechanics and the stuff, and people trust what you're saying on these topics. And from what you're saying here, there is no significant benefit to having this T4 Siege.
Not a significant benefit. And remember that Evony is a competitive game. So anybody that's telling you to make tier 4 siege, they just want to have the advantage over you.
All right. So yeah, I think that solidifies it. Guys, this for some people might be a sensitive topic. Feel free to let us know how you feel in the comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'm prepared to do what it takes. Get Derek on a call again, and we can run this back again, no problem. But I think for the greater good of the community, I think it's best that we decide what to do. And all indications point that there's nothing really special about T4 Siege. So stop churning them out in mass numbers. That's the hot take. Derek, man, thank you very much for hopping on the call with me. Okay, really appreciate you being here and stuff. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you for having me, Aka.
Are you going to be doing any more stuff on Siege? Is there anything that people should be expecting or looking forward to?
I'm in the works of going into much more detail on all the siege mechanics, including some extra additional siege strategies. I'm working on that video now, and hopefully it'll be out soon for everyone to completely change their mindset on siege.
All right, that's great. That's great, and I think a lot of people will be looking forward to that. And yeah, if it's something that could make the Siege game even a bit cheaper, I think that would be good, because Siege is expensive, man.
Yeah, it's a high risk, high reward investment.
Okay, that's cool. So, guys, I'll have the link to Derek's channel down in the description. You can also catch him on Discord. For any of you guys, you know where he is. Derek, thank you very much once again for joining me here. Really appreciate you having taken the time.
Anytime.
So that's it for us, guys. Aka, Derek Defies, signing out.